every moment of our existence over here and interaction with other people also has some greater meaning than just what we say and how we behave and how we talk. We are here for a purpose, each and every one of us. What is happiness? Okay, imagine if we had a device that just simulated likes. Would we just feel happy because like a robot would just simulate happiness to us and tell us we are good, we are great, and that's how we keep ourselves amused throughout our existence of 80 or 90 years? I mean, we don't live forever, and we're not the same as robots or machines. But if machines are satisfying us today, that's the scary part.
Hello friends, welcome to another episode on B Cubed, Breaking Boundaries with Sabeer Bhatia. Today we have a very special guest with us, Nilay Verma. Welcome Nilay to the show.
Thank you, David.
Nilay Verma is the CEO and co-founder of Primus Partners, a consultant by career who has had leadership roles in very well-known organizations such as PricewaterhouseCoopers, Accenture and KPMG, and leadership roles. He has pioneered in setting up the first and largest global Indian consulting house. He believes, called Primus Partners, and he believes that to make change at scale, you not only need intent, but policies and programs that align initiatives to incentives and help drive cultures. So welcome Nilay, and the subject we have for us today is basic human communication. Human expression, as you all know, is open-ended, versatile and diverse, ranging from ordinary language use to painting, from exaggerated displays of affection and emotion to micro movements that aid coordination. Humans communicate and express themselves in many different ways, through language, pointing, nodding, winking, improvised behavior like hand gestures, subtle body movements that even connect dance partners, and open-ended expressiveness of art and art forms. So my first question comes to you, Nilay. Very simple question. What is this human communications that we are dealing with here?
Thanks, Javed. As human beings, one of the first things that we do is we form opinions. And very often, or more often than not, opinions are formed on communication. Not just what's spoken, but a lot more which is not spoken. And that's where communication becomes interesting, because very often we confuse or can be myopic when we look at communication as written or spoken. For me, very often it's the non-spoken which is extremely important. Today, whether I was wearing a jacket or a sweater or a bright color or a dull color defines how people will see me as an individual, because we often jump to conclusion. Also because we form opinions based upon what we hear, and then we look at the framework that we have as an individual, we always make out a difference. Are we aligned? Are we different? Are we thinking? And therefore, in my view, communication is extremely important. And communication is about everything, not just about, as I said, what you speak or what you dress, but also how you act. The fact that if you and I are having a conversation, am I involved in that conversation also speaks to you about whether I'm here today or not here. The fact that I have somebody accompanying me and whether I'm listening to them, again, it communicates. So each and everything, hand gestures, in fact, are also part of communication. So I think at the end, Javed, communication is the core of societal and society.
Very well put. Sabeer?
No, I would completely agree with what Nilay has said. And in fact, add that I think we are heading into a world where, in addition to verbal and visual cues, there is also, I believe, a subconscious communication that goes on between individuals. I mean, if you really think of all of society as being, and all of our life on planet Earth as being divided into time, we spend whatever 80, 90 years on planet Earth. Every moment of our existence over here and interaction with other people also has some greater meaning than just what we say and how we behave and how we talk. We are here for a purpose, each and every one of us. So I think in addition to all the visual and audio and other forms of communication, there is also some kind of subconscious communication that occurs between individuals and humans when they meet. And in fact, not just between humans, but even with interacting with animals on planet Earth. And so I would, in addition to everything that you have said, extend it to even, a realm, and we will discover this one day. Maybe we're grappling, we're getting closer to it, but one day we'll realize that there is a subconscious communication that goes on between people as well.
Yeah, if I can, Sabir, add to that, you make a very interesting point, and I would say, Javed, that today communication starts even before you meet an individual. The fact that all of us have a profile in social media, and before I come in or before you meet anybody, the reality is you've already Googled. The person you follow gives the other a sense or communicates who you are. The fact today, we're recording this just after election. If I have voted and you can see it, you look at me as somebody who's socially responsible because I voted. So there's so many forms of communication, and that's what makes human mind far more complex than we would like to be.
Absolutely. There's something called metaphoric imagery, and communications, very general communications tend to rely a lot on metaphoric imagery. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, uh, metaphor and places and smells, all of them communicate. I think we find metaphors as an easy way to explain an extremely complex situation. Very often as a consultant, I tend to use this word, let the best not be the enemy of the good. Now, I have explained a lot, but I've used a small idiom, right? And similarly, getting cold feet, I just froze, and I'm father of two young daughters. You slay. It's all metaphor of what you're communicating. So it's extremely important. I mean, growing up or even today, the smell provides me a metaphor of how I feel about it because it reminds me of something and therefore it communicates to me something. So I think not just metaphor, I think smell and other sensory things are also about communication.
Yeah, and when it's the recall factor is very high with
Absolutely.
these kind of images and smells, and because that's how we remember things. I'll give you one example. I went to Caltech as an undergrad, and Caltech had a whole bunch of trees, and there is a particular kind of smell that those trees they emit. And so whenever I go back on campus, the first thing that hits me is it's the smell of Caltech because, I toiled so many hours studying. It's extremely quiet, sitting at the library. All those, memories come racing back, triggered by just smell. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's how can just something as simple as smell bring back, like 3 years of my existence over there.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think everything is association. In our minds, we associate a lot, we provide what today search would say tags, but our memory provides tags to everything that we see and perceive.
That's right. And we store it that way.
Yeah.
So that's where the storage bit of our human brain is so similar to that of the computer.
Absolutely.
And then to think of it, communication would be so boring without drawing metaphors and idioms, into into the interaction.
Use of language. There are some languages that communicate so much with so little, and it's the same sentence, but when put in a different way, it shows that there are two different worlds that we are operating in within our own heads, our own cerebral selves. That's the beauty of language, that language captures all of the culture of a society.
Yeah, in fact, if I can add, Javed, Sabir makes such an important point. Language and culture are extremely important to understand communication. You know, in India, for us to say yes and nod our head as if we were saying no is extremely common. But that's cultural. Now, somebody in the West may or may not appreciate it. May, for them, it may be a confusing signal. For us, it is very, very natural. So yes, culture is extremely important when we talk about communication or language, because I think we need to understand that. The fact that some cultures use expressive hand movement to communicate does not necessarily mean a sense of rage or anger, but that's what culture and language is about.
Yeah, the Italians,
Yeah.
the Latin Americans, expressive. First thing is hand gestures, movements. Oh my God, whatever you ask me. If you ask somebody for directions, they first say, "Oh my God, how do I explain this to you?" But that's the language, that's the culture.
So history is also, replete with instances of cross-cultural communication being either misunderstood or actually misunderstood for a good or a bad reason. And when it happens that way, the outcome can also be good or bad. Somebody said something good was understood as opposite, and the reaction therefore was not what was solicited.
Yeah, because
So-
some cultures, have, in order for to preserve themselves or for self-preservation, think that the world has to be us versus them. The moment you get that concept of us versus them, then there is distrust. There is a breakdown in communications, and I would uh, venture to say that in all of human conflict is a result of some sort of miscommunication, because we are not humanly built, subconsciously, to destroy another human being. Otherwise, we would have destroyed, the race would have been destroyed,
Long ago.
millions of years ago. We are conditioned to helping each other and finding, joy in each other's well-being. Just subconsciously or molecularly, that's how we are built. So, in a way, if you were to extend that idea, all of conflict, whether it's over land or it's over ideas or ideology or a way of thinking, is some result of some miscommunication somewhere.
Yeah, we'll come to that point later. That is a very specific point. But right now, something for you, Sabeer, because how do human communications, neural control, and semantic processing, of the brain, resemble data processing and analytics?
Very, very similar. In fact, we're getting closer and closer to being almost one. So let's start with the history of computing. Computers first had a CPU. They had a data that was stored in RAM or in long-term storage, and data was just all of human, expression, whether it was in the form of images, it was in the form of numbers, form of Excel spreadsheets, whatever it was. And the central processing unit processed that data and manipulated all of the numbers and gave you an output that once again we consume. But the way we communicated with the computer was through a language. A computer had its own language, computer languages. That's why they're called computer languages, whether it was C or C++ or Fortran or Pascal or whatever. As computers are evolving, they are becoming more like the human brain. They're becoming more, now you have something which is called a neuron, which is at the core of computing, because this whole field of artificial intelligence is not built on the CPU, but it's built on the GPU. And the GPU operates to process inputs from a neural model, a neural network of some kind, and so a lot of the processing that goes on in this neural network is things, talking about what exactly it is. It's like matrix multiplication in linear algebra. But the bottom line is that it is beginning, the neural networks are beginning to look a lot like human neural networks. So just as when you tell me something, it goes into my brain, I decode it, I process it, and then I respond to your question. Similarly, even the computers of today and certainly of the future will more closely resemble the human brain in their operation, in the way they process information, in the way they produce outputs. So no longer are the outputs more like a number. The outputs are more a decision. And that's how the human brain works. We are decision makers. We're not experts at calculating exact numbers. The computer does that. But we make, hopefully, we used to think that we make better decisions than human beings. But now, given that the structure of the computer is changing, it is beginning to even make decisions like humans. And because it has the intelligence of so much more sources of data, uh, the worry is that it will make decisions better than humans.
Yeah. If I can just add to
Please.
this, the combination of systems to be able to process natural language, but combined with emotion and intent, is really what's making the system so much more powerful, which hitherto wasn't being done because we were doing either just data but today we are combining that with intent and emotions, and that makes this extremely powerful.
So there is a whole another episode where we are going to actually elaborate upon this and discuss this at length. You were saying something.
So I was saying that emotion, empathy, intent, for us, we think it's unquantifiable. But the computer has put a quantity to it too. And when you throw that in, it will make a decision with empathy or without empathy. Putting in a whole data aspect to it. And that is what is worrisome, because now you can control the outcome, because you ask it to make, should all the decisions be without any empathy, or should they be to preserve some relationships? For example, of course, if you look at it from one lens, businesses are in business because they have to, keep adding to the bottom line. They have to become more and more efficient, but they are run by humans. And a business also has relationships with other businesses. So Walmart, for example, has relationships with 200,000 different suppliers. Recently, they introduced a chatbot that negotiates with all these suppliers and is able to reduce the cost of Walmart by 10 or 15%. Now, the reason it's able to do that is there is zero empathy in this chatbot. When it deals with a supplier, it doesn't take into account the 20 years of relationship that the supplier has built with the company. It says, listen, I just want the cheapest one. And if you cannot supply it, and it uses language to do the negotiation too, which is, it simulates that of a human being. Now, that would say that will do all corporations just become cold-hearted and be just about numbers and bottom line and about profits? Or is there a combination of the two when they are interrelated with other companies and other suppliers? So, that's of course an ethical debate, but talking about how, these kind of, and it's all done through communications.
Yeah. And Javed, if I can add to Sabeer, I think you're absolutely right. That's a concern and a question on ethics that needs to be answered. My worry is also another plank. The form of communication that I see more and more with young kids and coming to college or coming into workforce, they're far more comfortable with text as opposed to when we grew up, which was more face to face. And I'm not so sure with excessive reliance on text and with limited people to people interaction, which potentially can come down more and more because systems can make it more efficient. The aspect of mental health, something that we, especially in India, don't talk about it, but I see it every day. There's another issue which goes beyond just about the efficiency or the effectiveness of these systems, but society in general.
Yeah, I completely agree. Remember, I mean, when we grew up, let's say we did well in an exam or a test, somebody would come and physically pat us on the back. You know, you've done well. Today, all of that is a subconscious like,
Yeah.
you know, to a tweet or a post or showing, and the human interaction is going down, way down, and it's becoming all virtual. And like you said, text based, like based, and our brain is feeling, and of course, because the decision making processor in each of our beings is the brain. The brain is feeling happy or sad or emotionally unstable or whatever based on how many likes did I get, how many dislikes did I get, so many people did not appreciate this that I did. And if we are wiring our responses to a virtual, like a virtual machine or a device, where is the human communication? And if we lose our ability to, you know, relate to each other and communicate with each other and take away, you know, happy moments, what is happiness? Okay, imagine if we had a device that just simulated likes. Would we just feel happy because like a robot would just simulate happiness to us and tell us we are good, we are great, and that's how we keep ourselves amused throughout our existence of 80 or 90 years? I mean, we don't live forever, and we're not the same as robots or machines. But if machines are satisfying us today, that's the scary part.
Yeah, and think about it. Maybe it's my age coming out, but just a pat on the shoulder says so many things to an individual. I still can't replace that with how many likes I got to my post or a simple old-fashioned thing of a hug. I mean, it just tells you whether you're emotionally connected to an individual.
That is you. But ask the younger generation. They would any day trade the likes to a pat or a hug.
Partly because they haven't seen that. It's much more convenient and much more efficient, but long term, we still have to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then obviously, you know, the human to human communication is the subject that we started with and is of great importance because, like Nilay said, that there's nothing that can replace a hug or a pat, a literal pat on the back. Because in one of our other episodes, we've discussed happiness and longevity, and there we are talking about endorphins and serotonin and all those four happiness hormones, you know, and they come into play only when there is a human to human interface, no machines. The mobile phone or any other medium cannot do that. You're watching a film, for example, and it really gets you, you know, I mean, it gets you very excited. But then the flow of whatever hormones is not exactly the same as it is when you're out perhaps in the boxing ring, and you get a fist punch in your face and you punch somebody, you know, or you play golf or swim. So I think communication, human to human communication, is communication. Do you think, Nilay, that human to human communication is receding?
It is clearly.
Clearly.
It is clearly because the technology, the systems, the environment today um, incentivizes us to be extremely productive. And very often that productivity comes in use of systems as opposed to spending time. I mean, to give the example of what Sabeer said about Walmart, it is so much more efficient to do my negotiation with my vendors using a system. Now, if that's what's going to get incentivized, obviously the physical communication will recede. I do worry at point in time because very large part of the world is democracies, elected democracies. And obviously businesses drive many of the governments. I mean, it always has. But we're also coming to a situation where there's too much divergence between people who have and who do not have. And eventually, these are the people who elect our leaders. And I think there comes a point, and that's where the difference between the West and somewhat in the East starts to show, especially large countries like India, which are also continental sized countries, is to say, where is the limit that we're going to put? Now, it's oxymoron to say, do I put a limit to an artificial intelligence, right? But I do believe that will be a concern as we move forward about efficiency at what cost? Is it required? I mean, I know systems can do it, but I think that's a question that will come. It may manifest into different terms and terminologies, but eventually that's what it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, what he's really talking about is obvious loss of jobs, because if you remove the human element, the human loan officer, the human negotiator, the human relationship manager, and all of that with a machine, and increasingly with robots, I mean, you can even remove the role of a waiter to a robot. You've got so many restaurants today in the US you go to, and there is no human being at all. You can order whatever, a whole machine cooks everything for you, gives it to you. So there is a huge loss of, obviously, employment in this case. But then, is it inevitable? Because businesses are created for the purpose of making profit. And can we then give all those unemployed some other kind of jobs that are more creative in nature, allow them to be dreamers, allow them to dream about things, and pay them for being dreamers?
I think, Sabir, you're absolutely right. I think you've said it before. I think the world belongs to a creative economy. But I think it's the time to transition which is extremely important. I think inevitability is there, but the time and the transition period is very critical. Suddenly, somebody who's in grade 12, who's had a particular way of being taught, cannot adapt to a logical, creative thinking because most of his abilities have already been frozen, or very large part of it. So yes, retraining, etc. But I think the creative economy requires a fundamental change in the way we teach our kids.
For sure.
And that requires a period of transition, which would be different for countries with aging population to a much younger population.
Sure.
And so I think you're right. It's inevitable, but I think countries will have to drive a transition path. And I think the world will have to come together to make it more equitable.
So when you say countries have to drive a transition path, in the US, the whole belief is whatever happens, let it happen naturally. There is no forced, we'll do it in 5 years, we'll do it in, you have no control. You think you have control, just like you have no control over your kids. What they do is their life and they make their own decisions.
Yeah.
But you can just create an environment where there is not too much, upheaval during the transition time.
Yeah, as I say, every government's one of their fundamental responsibility is to create or to provide every individual the dignity to life.
Yes.
And therefore, you need to have a safety net. But I would also say one thing politicians like more than business or economy is getting re-elected.
That's right.
Yeah. So if it fundamentally impacts their ability to get re-elected, I think the regulations are going to see a very different hue than we think it may.
I agree with you.
So one very important question, if you may call it. What is the role of clear human communications in resolving conflicts and bringing about social stability? I mean, it stems from partly from what you've said, but what exactly, Nilay?
Understanding different or being clear in your communication is critical to avoiding conflicts. Because I think, Sabeer, you spoke about culture. I want to give you a couple of examples here. Many years back, my first engagement in Vietnam, consulting, this was coming from India. We had a signed contract. We go into what we typically call an inception meeting, wherein we go through the scope of work, we make changes, we exchange emails, and we move forward. That's what was important for me here in India. That's the way I did business. Fast forward 4 months, we are submitting our final report. Client says, you haven't completed the scope of work. He says, but we did. Here is the minutes of the meeting. He says, yeah, you submitted the minutes of the meeting, but I needed to approve it. Now, that's a conflict. And part of this is the kind of communication that was required, understanding the cultural thing. I'll give you another example. Very often when you get to negotiation, people will teach you never allow your final position as the opening position, right? But there are people, if you understand them, they hate having to beat around the bush. If they've decided to work with you, they want to look you into your eye and say, I want to work with you, come to the final point right then and there. So again, understanding the nuances and being clear in communication in the context of where you're meeting people becomes critical for avoiding conflict. And very often we don't do that.
Yeah. And this talk about this is once again nickeling and diming. It's like getting down to not like in the US, a deal is done when two people look each other in the eye and shake hands. Really, it's still old fashioned. And people don't negotiate on the paper. A deal is, so that's why there is something called deal terms, which is simple, one page, kind of a summary of what the terms are. And that's it. And whereas in our cultures, we, like in Vietnam or maybe in India, no, I need to approve it. You did not do. I mean, that is, come on, getting down to the niceties of you two people want to work, they should work together. And obviously, in all fairness, your firm put in the 4 months of effort, and you were there. You came every day. You did things. They should not. This is like nickeling and diming.
But very often, people use that to create power positions.
That's it.
Yeah, and that's when the conflict starts to happen.
Yeah.
Because typically, if you feel I have the power,
It's related to ego. Actually.
it's related to ego, and very often that's when they say, at least I say, let a contract be not negotiated by two lawyers.
Yeah.
They've really got nothing
That's
to
right.
lose.
I agree with you.
So friends, I hope you have enjoyed this conversation. Thank you, gentlemen, for imparting the gyan through your conversation. Should you have any questions, kindly put them on the B Cube Showreel app, which you can download from App Store or Play Store. And the gentleman here will be more than happy to answer your questions. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was very good. Thank you.